Let's call this next story, "It's all in the eyes of the beholder." Depending on your cable news channel of choice, you got widely divergent narratives on what happened.
President Trump walked out of the White House Monday and across the street to a church that had been set on fire the night before. Brandishing a Bible, he gave the usual stump speech.
We have a great country.
But right before that, a group of protesters had been cleared out of nearby Lafayette Park, with law enforcement using chemical agents to clear the crowd.
Hundreds of protesters had been gathered peacefully in Lafayette Park just outside the White House.
That's MSNBC, but Fox says the protesters got belligerent.
Of course, you use what's necessary safely to disperse the crowd.
Then there was the characterization of the event itself. CNN reported that the president was boosting his image after being accused of holding up in the White House.
He's hiding in a bunker, and he is embarrassed that people know that. So what does he have to do? He has to sic police on peaceful protesters so he can make a big show.
Fox, though, saw it as a stunning act of bravery.
And this is remarkable, Carl, what we're witnessing here, because he's walking right through the area that was so intense last night, where fires were burning.
Fox's Jesse Waters took it one step further.
The media is sour now because they were forced to shoot a photo op of the President of the United States demonstrating that he's not going to be intimidated by criminals.
Then again, CNN's Don Lemon had his own take.
This president comes from a reality show background. I'm just saying, this is all for show.
And apparently the show must go on, regardless of what's happening in the world.
Well, Dan, just to emphasize Callie's last point, the people in Lafayette Park that afternoon, Monday afternoon, were totally peaceful. There was nothing. Fox is claiming that when William Barr went out to do kind of a scout out of the park before the president did, that somebody started throwing water bottles at him. MSNBC says that didn't happen. And, of course, we also know the narrative that the president is saying there was no tear gas. He's mincing words because it was pepper balls and, smoke canisters. So they definitely used chemical agents on that crowd.
Well, you can really tell how upset Trump supporters are about this by their attempt to claim that no tear gas was used. Tear gas is kind of a generic term for various chemical agents, and they use chemical agents that could definitely be characterized as tear gas. And yes, we all saw this. There was no violence. This was a completely peaceful crowd, and all of a sudden, the various agents came through and started attacking the protesters, moving them out of the way so that President Trump could have his photo op. And then later, he was denounced by the clergy at that very church and in the Episcopal denomination for essentially using them for this photo op. So, yes, there are two narratives, but as so often is the case with the Trump presidency, one of the narratives is right and one of them is wrong.
I guess we were watching two different stations. Hey, Callie.
I saw, and it was crazy. What really stuck with me was that neighbor who gathered up the people who were so disoriented and tear gas, by the way, and he brought them into his house, about 70 people, to spend the night because they couldn't go anywhere because the police were pushing them, saying you have to get off the street, but they had nowhere to go. They were in a street you couldn't go anywhere. So that's the first thing. The second thing is Don Lemon, for once, is right. I mean, this is a showman's whole thing. Let's do some reality TV. And my thing is, if you're gonna walk through and hold up a Bible, please turn it upside the right way, and maybe you want to open it and say something about what's inside. But it was upside down, so that should say a lot about what this moment meant to that guy.
I think the timing of this is what's really important. Anybody who's covered the president knows that wherever the president goes, the route is cleared and secured well before it happens. The Trump was speaking, if I remember correctly, just about the same time that they started to clear the street. So if he was serious about taking this step for whatever purpose, they would have had that cleared well before. But they did it right before because they wanted to show, it seemed to me, having also been watching this, that they wanted to show that the federal government is in charge, that Trump is not afraid. I think also people's minds are galvanized. I've spoken to people who think it was outrageous what happened, a total abuse of power. I've also heard from people who said, they believe that the crowd was unruly, the crowd was throwing rocks, and that they had to be cleared out. So I think at this point in America, beauty's in the eyes of the beholder. You know, you can see two people can see the same thing and come up with totally different opinions.
Well, I think one of the things is they didn't have to be cleared out. That's the key. You know, the people were just minding their own business, doing their protest. If he wanted to make a statement, he didn't have to push them out to make it.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
Saw that we talked about how the media should or shouldn't identify themselves as liberal or conservative, and I think this is a really great example of how they already do. Even Fox News had said that, you know, he marched through this area that last night was full of violence. So they're not talking about what happened minutes before. You've got the left side talking about the actual things that happened. Yes, as Callie pointed out, he held the Bible upside down. When he held the spine towards the camera, you saw that it was an RSV Bible, which is a version of the Bible that the evangelicals he was trying to reach denounce because they don't agree with the translation. And so not only did he have the Bible upside down and the wrong version of it, he was standing in front of a church that espouses tenets that the evangelicals do not. So while the visuals may have been very thought out, the intent was clear, and one side of the media was reporting on that intent, if you looked at the actual facts, if you looked at what actually happened, it wasn't as clear. I'm not sure that it's really two sides as opposed to each other as much as it is one side reporting what's happening and one side reporting what they want to have happened.